You're watching the Brotherhood of Gaming, and yes, you are never.
Ooh! Did I scare you? Happy Halloween, you horror monkeys! Ha 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 ha! Although it's not really Halloween yet, that's close enough. It has been a long time since I've done one of these video reviews, but at least I have a good reason. So good that you actually have to go to another video just to find out what they are. But anyway, it's the holiday season, October, Halloween, and I don't think I've done quite enough for it this year. Which is why I'm coming to you today to take you back to the past, 1989 to be exact, to review a game I'm sure many of you are aware of, and also home of one of my all-time favorite horror icons. Now, I'm more than sure many of you have already seen James Rolfe do an over-the-top review of this game a few years ago in his early years of the angry video game nerd. Happy to say my reviews of games are not influenced by others. I always play the games for myself and give out my own honest opinion. James himself even states on his website that the majority of his reviews are over-exaggerated for the sake of comedy. The point is, you won't have to worry about this review being an imitation of his or about me going all angry nerd on the game. Instead, I'll be looking into the game more deeply and seeing if it's redeemable from the bad hype it's gotten since then. And the fact that LJN has its infamous rainbow plaguing it, it already doesn't help much.
Always a disappointment.
The game was released in 1989, and by that time there were already 5 Freddy Krueger movies released, counting The Dream Child, which was on August 11th in the same year. Although the game's story has little to nothing to do with the plot of each film, it does however borrow certain elements, and also requires a little bit of imagination to understand what's going on. The game manual, on the other hand, does give you a little bit of a story to follow up on, explaining that teenagers are dying off each day for unknown reasons except for a few that happen to know they are being tormented by a dream demon.
Yeah, sure.
Known as Freddy. Who else?
Well, it ain't Dr. Seuss.
I find that hilarious. The surviving kids come to terms that they have to work together to find all of Freddy's scattered bones and burn them in the school's boiler room. So already you get a kind of Simon's Quest feel, where you gotta go and collect pieces of Dracula to bring him back to life just to kill him again.
Now I'm playing with power!
Now you're playing with power.
Yeah, that'll work. As for the rest of the monsters roaming around, it does look pretty stock, but if you understand how Freddy works, is he brings out your inner fears and strikes you when you're at your weakest. So we can assume that whomever we're playing as was probably watching Frankenstein's monster before this madness began. And who isn't afraid of snakes or spiders? Another interesting factor is the whole awake and asleep thing. Monsters are in both dimensions. Well, ironically, the new Nightmare on Elm Street film probably answers that the best. Granted, this is 20 years later.
I haven't slept in 3 days. We're running out of time.
At the 70-hour mark, the insomniac will begin to experience micronaps. It means you're dreaming, but you don't know it. Even if you're awake.
Yet, I can believe it as a logical explanation. So as far as Nintendo and story goes, they really did try to be original and cover their bases, and you really can't fault them for getting that far. I'm not against the idea of using your own characters, but perhaps some mentioning of the previous characters and a little more to do with Freddy would have been some good icing on the cake. For what it's worth, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. The game has a 4 multiplayer option. Granted, you have to have an accessory pack to do so, but finding 3 other players to move alongside you probably was asking a bit too much at the time. You're pretty lucky if you could find just one other sucker to play it with you. Fortunately for me, that's not too big a problem, but sadly, most of the time you'll be on your own.
And now you're all alone!
And that's just how Freddy likes it.
Why don't you, call on one of your little friends? Maybe they could help.
You travel Elm Street from left to right, trying to figure out which house you can enter. It's random every time, so you're never going to end up in the same route every time you restart the game. While wandering around, you're constantly attacked by monsters that your character is likely afraid of. It's sort of a half-asleep thing. Speaking of asleep, you'll want to keep an eye on that little bar above the top. This is your sleep meter. As time goes on, it gradually decreases, and once it hits 0, you cross dimensions and enter the dream realm. I guess you could say it's like Jesse's sleepwalking from Nightmare on Elm Street 2. An interesting fun fact is that the main cover, Freddy's claws are coming out of his fingers, and he's not wearing his glove, which is how Freddy was portrayed in the exact same movie. Once you fall asleep, again referring to Simon's Quest, it's almost like being cursed. The enemies sometimes are doubled and can also be stronger. To make matters worse, the longer you linger in the dream realm, you will eventually hear Freddy's famous rhyme, signaling you that he is on his way for a fight round.
Ready or not, here I come.
You really want to avoid these whenever possible. The only way to really do that is if you're awake, you can find cups of coffee to replenish your dream meter. When you're asleep, you can find boom boxes that will wake you up. Naturally, these are used from the movies, which is a good formula to follow. Even though the dream world is open game for Freddy to torment you, you're not exactly defenseless either. Keep in mind, you are dreaming, so there is no reason for you not to do the impossible. By finding 3 different symbols, your character can transform into 3 different types of dream warriors. Obviously reference to the 3rd film, you can transform into an athlete javelin thrower, which is similar to the Ghosts and Goblins game, a ninja which can do high kicks and throw ninja stars, which can be similar to Ninja Gaiden, and there is the necromancer magician, or...
I am the Wizard Master! In the name of Lorik, Prince of Elves, Demon be gone!
Yeah, you know. Running up to the killer with the deadly claws is probably one of the worst ways to avoid getting killed by the demon with killer claws. After you enter the houses and collect Freddy's bones in each area, you're then forced to dream and engage him in a boss battle, which can sometimes be his extended claw, which I would imagine the idea came from the 1st film, or his snake form, which was in the famous scene in the 3rd film. Or... Nosferatu. The hell? Whatever. Why not? We got Frankenstein's monster running around. And I guess for what could pass as Freddy's skeleton from the 3rd movie. Maybe while dealing with Freddy's... everything, you will find keys. After beating each boss will grant you access to a new area. As the game progresses, it really does start to get very challenging, and it only takes you a few hits to knock a life off of your continues. The game is not very long, but the difficulty will likely make up for it, being you'll probably be reliving the nightmares again. Like the story before, I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Hey, you forgot the power gloves!
It's very surprising, for LJN that is, how responsive the controls actually are. Like most horror games of the 90s, where bad control added to the scare effect, this one of the late 80s makes sure you're in control. You have only 2 main buttons, of course, being a Nintendo game. B is the jump button and A is your attack. When in the dream world, you can press the select button to choose between different dream warriors, in which your attack button now becomes a new power for each one. Even when you're in midair, you're perfectly capable of steering yourself where you want to go. When I played this game, I had hardly no control issue. The only time I can think of is sometimes my punches would be a little off. Aside from a few bad hits, the control has a good standing of a 9 rating. Amazing, isn't it?
Sounds like fun.
This is also where the game manages to do decently well. Although sometimes odd for what you think would otherwise be unfitting to the idea of Freddy Krueger, the music does sort of remind me of a, big shocker, Castlevania. I'm serious. But the difference is, in Castlevania, you're a badass vampire killer going to slay Dracula. Nightmare on Elm Street, you're supposed to be scared shitless trying to get the job done and stay alive. Even Freddy has his own Castlevania theme boss music. At least LGN knew what game they had to borrow from in order to make this one good. The music really does work, but it makes you feel more like you're gonna go kick Freddy's ass rather than be afraid of him as you really should be. I still like it though, so it deserves at least a 7 out of 10.
Bon appetit, bitch!
Now, when it comes to the 16 and 8-bit days, it's really hard to judge graphics. Or at least if it's not obvious, it's rushed. The houses, though built blindfolded, are good too. Freddy looks like Freddy, Freddy's coming looks like he's coming, and overall the feel of the game looks well done. You know, this may be the only game LJN got decent. That's 3 8s. Boy, did they get lucky. My overall opinion of the game is that it's above decent. It's a solid and pretty good game to boot. It's short but challenging. It follows elements from the films without using the plots or characters, and tries to be original. I actually say, if you're a Freddy Krueger fan, give it a shot. You may like it. It takes some getting used to because I can't say if it's aged well, considering what games we have for horror thrills today, but for nostalgia's sake and going back where the horrors have begun, it's worth looking over. But otherwise, I say pass the game up. If horror isn't your thing, then in no way is this going to tickle your fancy. You've been watching another video game review by the Brotherhood of Gaming. Be sure to visit the official website and subscribe to both of our YouTube channels, our review channel and our walkthrough channel. If you have a game you would like to see us review, let us know. Until next time, keep on gaming, viewers. And that is pretty much exactly what I think about the game.
Can I ask you something?
Certainly.
Is that what you think?
Ah!